Good evening. If I could ask for some silence and welcome you to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand. Very nice to see such a full house for this very important topic. Before we get going, just a few club activities. Tomorrow we have Mai Nadone talking here, Nadone, Thai-American author, who has written this book, Welcome Me to the Kingdom, which has been received extraordinary acclaim in the press, and particularly in New York. So he'll be here tomorrow at 7 p.m. talking with Lisa Martin, our president. And for those of you who are working journalists, there's a half-day workshop on the 15th of June, which has just come on into view, and that's taking a look at fake news, propaganda, and open source intelligence, and it's a training course. There are only 25 places, so if you're interested, sign up quickly. And so to this evening, we're going to be taking a look at the terrible state of the air in Thailand this year. Of course, we're now in early June, and the rains have begun and the air has cleared, relatively speaking, and we've all forgotten about how absolutely diabolical it was just 2 months ago, particularly in northern Thailand. Now, we have here a graphic that I just want to show you before we start the program that kind of sets the scene for what's going on. This is an article that we had in Nikkei Asia about a month ago, and we included in it these graphics, which are the satellite shots that NASA produces on the 14th of every month. So they have a satellite that comes over, takes a snapshot, which is basically heat sensitive, and it shows you what's going on. So here we have Southeast Asia in October, and as you can see, there's very little sign of heat except up actually in China. And as the month goes by, we get into November. A bit faster, please, Tom. Yep, we're there in November. And you can just see that fires are beginning to light up on the spine of Thailand, in Vietnam and Cambodia. And then we get into December and they become a little bit more intense. And you can see them lighting up in India as well, on the left. And then we get into January. A bit faster, Tom. Let's just get this done. So here we are in January, and you see that it's all becoming a little bit more intense. It's spread across India. The northern island in the Philippines is lighting up. And in fact, the first really hot zone that you spot is going to be the Philippines. But mainland Indochina is now really warming up. And what you're seeing is that northern Thailand, the Shan states of Burma, Myanmar, and Laos still relatively cool. So we go through to March, and again, more intensity. And it's spread right across Burma, in fact, but it's still hot in the Shan states, but it's not illuminating Laos particularly yet. April. There you go. So suddenly Laos has become probably the hottest part of Southeast Asia, hotter than northern Thailand, but the whole of the Shan states in Myanmar are ablaze. So that just gives you a snapshot of the way it happens. It's a 5-month window, and it comes and goes with the dry season, basically. But that's a very good demonstration of it. Okay, so if I could ask our speakers to step up. We have 5 very distinguished speakers this evening. And Danny. Yes, just sort yourselves out. I think we need Ajahn Noi next to the computer. And wait a minute, where's your stuff? Okay, Tom, can you switch off the Nikkei stuff and bring up Mark? Okay, so just wait. So we've got tonight, Ajahn Noy is still having her dinner, so I'll introduce her when she's finished. We have, on my far right, Dr. Kritayako Siripason, who is from the Department of Disease Control, which is part of the Ministry of Health. We have Kundetarut Sokum Noel, who's a member of Parliament elect for Move Forward, and he is the director of the Think Forward Centre, which is Move Forward's think tank. Thank you, very welcome. And on my right, we have Danny Marks, the Assistant Professor of Environmental Politics and Policy in the School of Law and Government at Dublin City University in Ireland, of course. But Danny has spent 8 years in Thailand. He comes back here for his summers, just when the smoke clears, and studies everything. But, I mean, he's a fire fiend. He's been following the situation. So we thought it would be appropriate on that basis to kick off. Just a minute. Mark Zimmerman has just appeared in Chiang Mai, and he's joining us on Zoom. Mark is a public health scientist, but he's a very important figure in the sense that he's an active consumer of this pollution, as he lives in Chiang Mai, and he follows it extremely closely, and is going to give us a very interesting explanation of why it was so bad this year. And his other sort of power muscle is that his wife is a doctor, a pediatrician, so she's totally clued in to the medical scene in Chiang Mai. So, right, Danny. I'd like Danny to start because he can give us the big picture of what's going on. Danny.
No, just move over there.
Yeah, much more.
All right, good evening, everybody. It's good to be back at the FCCT. I actually spoke here once in 2015. So I'll be briefly giving an overview of this research I conducted over the past few years on air pollution and argue why it's a form of slow violence. Just to start with, I think many of you are familiar, about 50,000 premature deaths are attributed to air pollution here in Thailand per year. Estimated 2 years of life expectancy is lost due to air pollution, but in Chiang Mai, it can be up to 3 years. And I think as you all know, earlier this year, Bangkok and Chiang Mai were in the top 5 most polluted cities in the world, at its peak 40 times higher than WHO standards. And also over 2 million people fell ill as a result of air pollution. So I mentioned this idea of slow violence. It comes from a book written by Rob Nixon, who's a professor at the University of Wisconsin. And basically, so what I argue is that slow violence air pollution is a form of slow violence because it's basically seen as gradual and out of sight. And so in ways that are unremarkably dispersed across time and space and typically not viewed as violence at all. And I also argue it's perpetrated by business and political elites that further marginalize already vulnerable sections of Thai society who experience the creeping longitudinal impacts of toxic exposure that produce health conditions and shape life opportunities spanning entire lifetimes. So I'll now try to show how this is a form of slow violence in Thailand. But before I go there, I think also many of you are familiar with the political economy of Thailand. In 2019, Credit Suisse came out and said that Thailand had the largest wealth gap. So the richest 1% controlled 67% of the country's wealth. So it's up there with countries like India and Russia. And so as Pasuk Pongpaichit and Chris Baker argue in their book Unequal Thailand, these wealth inequalities bred other kinds of inequities, including privileged access to justice and political power or an oligarchy. And so what I also show is how this affects air pollution and who suffers and benefits from its production. So just as a reminder, 2nd of February this year, you can see Bangkok is number 3 in terms of city rankings globally in terms of air pollution. Chiang Mai, a month later, just over a month later, was worst in the world. So it's clearly a major issue. So I've conducted about 20 interviews with different experts over the past few years, from government, from civil society, from business as well, and scientists And so I'll basically go through the 4 major primary sources of air pollution: transport, industry, forest fires, and agriculture. I mean, construction is also a source, but it's not as big as these ones. So we'll start from here in Bangkok. A major source of PM2.5 throughout the year comes directly from vehicles in the metropolitan region. This is a map that we created in our article. I mean, it's a few years old, but I think it's still basically the same. You can see vehicular emissions are concentrated, particularly in Bangkok, but also in parts of the Northeast. And so basically, there's 2 main reasons why transport emissions are significant. One is just the sheer number of cars in Bangkok. Between 1999 to 2019, they rose by over 250%, from over 4 to over 10 million. But also, there's a high level of emissions emitted from the existing fleet of vehicles. There's a number of old cars with low fuel efficiencies and high pollutant outputs. The number of cars 10 years or older almost doubled from over 7 million to 14 million in 2019. And diesel-fueled vehicles account for about 25% or over 3 million of the cars here. Pickup trucks, I'm sure as you're familiar, are quite popular in the country, and also subsidized by low excise taxes. And so contrary to other countries, Thailand's tax on older vehicles is actually lower than that of newer vehicles. And there's no cash for clunkers programs or anything like that to incentivize people to trade in their cars for newer ones. Also, Thailand's Euro standards are outdated compared to the EU, but also other places like Japan and Korea. It was supposed to be updated this year to Euro 5, but it was delayed earlier this year to 2024. And so this is important because the higher the standard, the stricter the amount of air particulate matter you're allowed to emit. But that's been pushed back. Apparently, Japanese automobile companies have been ones trying to delay this because they said it would cost them. But just briefly, those who are most responsible for transport emissions in Bangkok are the middle and upper class. They're the majority of car owners. They rarely take public transport. They commute longer distances. I mean, I didn't talk about this too much, but they've been against bus lanes or congestion pricing. Also, Japanese automobile companies that I talked about have been against raising Euro standards. They've also been pushing back against EVs. Luckily, China now is coming in with that. The poor generally have a much smaller pollutant footprint. They take the bus or ride motorbikes, but they bear the brunt of effects of air pollution from transport. Like particularly at roadside or underneath flyovers where low-income communities live. So examples would be street sellers, street vendors, motorbike taxi drivers, or open-air bus riders who suffer the most. So now to scale up to the regional level, here in Bangkok, one major source is also industrial pollution, fuel combustion from machines and burning from production processes in the factories. One study estimates in 2019 that 17% of the air pollution comes from industries. There's about 40,000 factories surrounding Bangkok. And once again, this clearly shows that industrial emissions are concentrated in Bangkok and the metropolitan region around it. The problem, though, is that Thailand doesn't actually have a database detailing these factories' emissions. We don't know how much they're polluting and what type of pollutants are coming. It's known as an emissions inventory. In other countries, you have legislation which has been passed to mandate these countries. The US, for example, you have a toxic release inventory. In other countries, like in Europe, you have pollutant release and transfer registers, or PRTR. Some NGOs have been pushing for a PRTR here, but it hasn't been successful yet. So this basically means it's impossible to identify factories which release air pollution at high levels, and also it inhibits developing standards to control factory emissions. So there's no laws to force factories to switch to cleaner production processes. And a parliamentary advisor who I interviewed said there's no PM2 standards existing for factories. Another person I interviewed says we're basically working blind because we don't have this registry. But also there's a weakening of environmental regulations by this current government. They revised the Factory Act in 2019 so that small companies or small factories will not be monitored for air pollution, and also they need to renew their licenses. This is about 40% of factories. NGOs have said the law will increase air pollution and was designed to satisfy business groups. In 2018, the EEC Committee, or the Eastern Seaboard, issued new guidelines that replaced all existing town planning guidelines. So basically to push for the conversion of agricultural land to industry including hazardous waste disposal plants and power plants. And local communities were not consulted about this. So overall, there's weak oversight and conflict of interest. PCD generally does not fine or close factories. Instead, basically, this is in the hands of the Department of Industrial Works, DIW, and the Ministry of Interior. But their mandate is to increase industrial development, so it rarely does this. So there's a conflict of interest here. And there's no incentives or subsidies for factories to switch to cleaner production methods. So once again, there's widespread inequities here. Those who profit the most, factory owners and shareholders, rarely live near or work in factories. Those who suffer are workers or communities nearby. For example, in Samut Sakhon province, the fourth highest concentration of factories. It's near Bangkok. There's high PM2.0 levels, but also high levels of lead in blood. And of course, Mataput, eighth largest petrochemical hub. And at one point, 119 times air pollutant levels above safety standards. And 2,000 people had died from cancer linked to its air pollution. And so now to go to the last two ones, forest fires and agricultural burning. I'll focus more on agriculture. This is certainly the largest source of air pollution during the dry season here. And in Chiang Mai, estimates are about up to 90% of emissions are from these two sources, and other places, of course, in the north. This is from 2019, so it's a little outdated, but I think at least gives you a general overview. Agricultural emissions are concentrated in the center, in the north, and also forest fires are particularly in the north. And so here's a general, you can see together about biomass burning. Though I think this year it's certainly worse than this. So forest fires, number of reasons for forest fires. Penchant, I guess, could be said. Numerous reasons: harvesting lucrative mushrooms, collecting red ant eggs, but also clearing land for hunting and agriculture. So hunters, for example, can create open grassland, which enables them to kill animals. The government has a blanket ban on all burning activities, which a lot of other countries have done. But the problem is they haven't followed other countries and conducted back burning and other fire containment techniques, so that when a fire does start, it spreads more easily, becomes more harmful, it's harder to contain, and it causes more air pollution. So yes, but as I mentioned, some of this is linked to agriculture. And so I'm now going to focus on agricultural burning, which is it's a big one. So within Thailand, of course, I mean, one of the big crops is sugarcane, particularly around here. Thailand's the second largest sugarcane producer globally, generates about 6 billion per year, and it's supported by the government, which has a quota and distribution system that even has its own Office of Cane and Sugar Board under the Ministry of Industry. Production's concentrated in the central region. So here you can see the sugarcane mills around Thailand. So wide burning accounts for about 60 to 67% of cane production. Farmers burn the sugarcane to reduce the amount of leafy extraneous material, such as stalk tops. And the two main reasons they do it is it's cheaper, but it's also quicker, and it doesn't require, and there's labor shortages. Estimates of a harvesting machine are about 500,000 baht, but as an agricultural promotion department officer is saying, the harvesting machine is very expensive, most farmers are poor, they won't use it. And also the key is contract farming. Farmers are locked into contract farming schemes, so they're already under pressure to produce, they're already squeezed in terms of profit margins, so they feel pressure to deliver sugarcane on time, and also they're already in debt, so they can't afford these extra investments.
I have a question.
No, sorry.
Do they burn the sugar?
Sorry, we don't do it like that, okay.
The misconception going on here.
No, they don't burn the sugar, they burn the leafy material.
Oh, do they? I was wrong.
So yes, and then the other is maize. I've been given the green light to. I think it's okay to mention companies which dominate: CP, Betagro, Cargill. 70% of the country's production shifted to this region. It's driven by animal feed boom, which I'll talk about more, but it did start in 2007 and 8, but really took off over the last, say, few years. Agribusinesses have encouraged contract farming. I think a few years ago, CP bought 80% of maize production in non-province. Though, as I'll talk about, they've moved it more to Laos and Myanmar recently, but they burn copious amounts of waste. And then the final product is rice. Rice farmers routinely burn rice stubble in order to prepare fields for the next round of crops. But a similarity between all three, maize, sugarcane, and rice, is that burning is attractive because it's cheaper and requires less labor and time. There are political economic factors. Agriculture policies continue to promote these industries through subsidies, quotas, extension services. As I mentioned, farmers are in debt. They can't afford to invest in technology or use more laborious methods. Agribusiness companies and farmer groups have actually pushed governments to relax the percent of burnt products they can sell, particularly sugarcane. And now is the last level, to the transboundary level. A significantly higher proportion of emissions actually originate from Myanmar and Laos. This is tied to the aforementioned maize boom, but also recently a cassava boom, particularly in Laos. It's linked to what some academics call meatification, or increased meat consumption, particularly in China, but also in places like Vietnam and elsewhere. So there's high demand for animal feed, particularly maize. So farmers have switched to growing maize because they can sell it for a higher price and in larger quantities. Sugarcane, also you can cut yourself. It's not as easy to grow in places like Myanmar. And so, for example, in March this year, you can just see that Thailand had about 5,500 hot spots, but it was almost double of that in both Laos and Myanmar. And this map, I think Dominique already showed this earlier, that you can see how many hot spots there are in the neighboring countries. And so one question is, why is it so bad this year? Well, first is the El Nino effect. This is the El Nino year exacerbated by climate change. It's caused the dry season to come early, caused fires to become drier and thus easier to burn. Dramatic growth in food demand in Myanmar, Laos, and Thailand, thus cash crop growing, particularly maize and cassava. Farmers have cleared land, so they both burn the forest and then they burn these crops as the production processes. The price of maize has almost doubled in the past 5 years. And then last year and in previous years, there was COVID border controls, for example, in China. And so that was a deterrent, but now China's back open, and so there's much more exports to China, for example. But what does Thailand have to do with this burning in Myanmar and Laos? And so the link is the key role of Thai agribusinesses. So Kevin Woods, who's a researcher at the University of Hawaii, and I just met a couple weeks ago, in 2015, but it's still very relevant, he went to Myanmar and he found out that basically CP, through middle brokers, basically gave them seeds, and they then persuaded and incentivized farmers to switch to maize through contract farming schemes in Shan state, and then they send it through China. But also, maize production in Laos has increased. It's largely sold to a subsidiary of CP, the Vietnamese subsidiary, and a meat producer. And Thailand is now a major destination of cassava grown in Laos. It's processed here. So Thai companies are a key part of this supply chain. But also Thai companies like Konkan Sugar, Mitrapon have expanded in both Cambodia and Laos in terms of sugar, but also in terms of lignite fire near the Thai border. So this transboundary issue or problem is a failure of many different organizations. The first is ASEAN. ASEAN has a haze-free roadmap, an ASEAN agreement on transboundary haze pollution, but it hasn't worked. The agreement lacks provisions. It's up to each state to enforce it. It has no teeth. But the Thai government, there's no law to penalize companies whose transboundary activity contribute to air pollution. This is in big contrast to Singapore, which had its 2014 transboundary haze pollution, which fines Singaporean companies, for example, who invest in palm oil plantations in Indonesia, and that fire comes back to Singapore, or the smoke comes back to Singapore. And then finally, Thai companies. Thai companies have not taken any responsibility. They set up shell companies. For example, Greenpeace launched a report, and they haven't taken any responsibility for their actions. So once again, just a couple more slides. Those who profit the most are Thai agribusiness conglomerates, but they don't have to pay for this externality. Well, they do suffer from the air. They're not as direct as, say, the farmers who have to breathe it in directly. They're not blamed by the government and the public so much. So I think this is changing a little bit. And then farmers have, in the past, been cast as the villains, and they bear the brunt. So just a few final things. There are big government shortcomings. There's a weak lead agency. PCD is quite weak, the Pollution Control Department. There's fragmented governance and conflicts between agencies who work in silos, overlapping laws, which weakens their mandates. And the government has always kind of pushed this narrative of economic growth over curbing pollution. That Thailand's a poor country, so we need to postpone Euro standards. We need to relax burnt sugarcane levels. I won't talk about the Thai Clean Air Act because John Noy will talk about that in a little bit. But I do think Thailand, the Clean Air Network's version is certainly a very positive way forward of what to be done. What are some other possibilities? So yeah, I mean, ideally you would collect corn waste for biofuel, but the question is who will pay for the cost? Some of this corn is grown in remote areas and highlands, so who's going to pay for the labor, access roads, trucks, etc.? Provide sugarcane farmers with harvesting machines. This was successfully done in Brazil. Brazil's been able to reduce its burning from sugarcane very successfully. Another idea has this cancer corn campaign to put pressure on these agribusiness companies, akin to the blood sugar one in Cambodia. But I'll just stop there in the interest of time. But thanks.
Great. Many thanks for that. As you can see, it's a huge subject that goes in all directions. So now we're going to go to Dr. Krit, who's joining us from the Department of Disease Control, and he will give us a good idea about how this chronic pollution translates into a health cost for Thailand that's phenomenal. Is it all running? There we go.
Hello.
Yep.
1, 2, 3. Okay. Let's start with this. Okay. All people, it's clear. Okay. I think all people have to breathe, whether the air does or does not contain air pollutant. And right now, I think that the public and everyone aware about the air pollution, and I think we don't know everything about the air pollution or PM 2.5, but the facts that we already know is the must that we have to do it now. Yeah. Good evening, everybody. I would like to start my speaking by say thank you to the FCCT to invite me to be here to give you an information. It is honorable for me to be here and to share the information based on my presentation today. My presentation is to present you how about the health effect and the association between the health effect and the air pollution or PM 2.5. Okay. Okay, let's start with the first question. Does air pollution or PM 2.5 affect to the health, and how much? Okay, the first presentation is about the review articles. It published in 2020. It will conclude that the PM 2.5 or air pollution can irritate mucosa, something like nasal cavity, your eyes or conjunctiva, something like that, and then they can go through into your body, into your lungs, into the other organ, and make chronic inflammation. But it's not toxic to your body, like cyanide. Okay. Okay. There is a lot of large number of research that published about the air pollution that associated with the health of population. It is about more than 50,000 articles that published in PubMed right now. The PubMed is the National Library of Medicine of US, NIH. Okay. Please note that this research or this clinical study is mainly observational study or epidemiologic study, not to experimental study, because it is unethical to perform experimental something that hazard to human. Okay, I give you an example because we have 50,000 research. We cannot talk one by one. I choose the best one that I think it published in Lancet 2022. Okay, this research, they call it peer study. The peer study is stand for prospective urban rural epidemiology study. It is designed to attempt to provide information across several countries, especially those outside the North America and outside Western Europe. Okay, it is worldwide and delete the North America and Western Europe. The study includes about 150,000 people. Okay, I forget, sorry. It includes about 150,000 people in this study. Those are without any cardiovascular disease before, and they follow up about 7.5 years. And a minute, okay. The estimation about the PM2.5 is shown in my presentation. Okay, please note that the PM2.5 level is higher in the middle income and low income community when he compare with the high income community. Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay, let's see the result. The result was shown in the bar graph. First, the y-axis is the way that they present how dangerous or what is the risk to health. It called PAF or population attribute fraction. It is a calculation model for research about the health and effect to anybody. The detail you can see in this slide, but please note that when we read the PAF, like in this bar chart, it is about the cardiovascular death or CVD. Okay. Cardiovascular death in this slide, it shown that mainly it is about the first one. Hypertension is the most impact. Other risk health include this one, the red arrow is the air pollution, is also contribute to the cardiovascular death. So when we interpret this result, the cardiovascular death is multifactorial, and the major impact is the hypertension. The PM2.5 or air pollution is also a risk factor to this cardiovascular death. Okay. About the myocardial infarction, it is the same. Yes, it is multifactorial, and air pollution or PM2.5 contribute the risk of their health, but the most impact one is the high cholesterol. Okay, I hope you can see it. And if you want the slide, the presentation, you can ask the organizer. This slide, I want to show you the relation about the health impact if PM2.5 level is increasing. Okay, just see on the first study. The first study is the same that I present you in the previous slide that published in Lancet. Okay, let's see the result. Okay, the result is about they said that for each 10 unit increase in outdoor or ambient PM2.5 level, there was a hazard ratio of 1.05. in the risk of cardiovascular death. It can simply say that it increased the risk of cardiovascular death about 5% compared to the baseline. Okay, and another that you see 95% CI or confidence interval is 1.02 to 1.08. It means that the result of this study is increasing 5% correctly. It is the data of this sample that they pick up from 21 countries. If we want to generalize to the whole 21 countries of anybody in the countries, it can say that 95% confidence that the risk of cardiovascular death is about 2% to 8% for generalize these 21 countries. Okay, is it include Thailand? No, it includes only Malaysia for Southeast Asia. Yeah, I'm not the researcher. Don't comment me. It is Harvard University who conduct the research. Okay, this is the research in Thailand about the lung cancer and correlation with the air pollution. Okay, but it is the detail of the study. Where is it? The northern part that involve this we call area health region 1. It is the MOPH that divide the office of their regional area to divide its responsibility to each specific area to do any measure or activities in the specific area for specific context. Okay, we call the health area region 1. It is almost equal to the northern part of Thailand. Okay, and this study also in the area health region 1, it is a retrospective cohort study. The detail of the measurement of the PM 2.5 that I show you in this slide, they use the satellite data and they mapping with the register address of the subject. The limitation I show you in this slide. Okay, so let's interpret their data. The results show that if lung cancer patient live in the air pollution in the northern part of Thailand, the risk is about okay, I see a lot of your photo here. Okay, no, okay, 106. Okay, it is about 6% higher than baseline. Okay, and if you want to generalize, it is about 1% to 11% that increase the risk of death of lung cancer people. So I have reviewed the research in the past, and I help you to interpret the data that they present you in the medical literature or article. Okay, so you can do it by yourself because it have more than 50,000 articles. Yes. Okay, I give you just some example. Okay, there is a lot of disease that they report. So we move to the current data that MOPH or DDC have in this year. Okay, this data show you we call the SMOC EP0. The SMOC EP0 is a new database of the DDC. Is designed to monitor the health and the health of people in the health area region 1 that I showed you in the previous slide that they study in the northern part of Thailand. And this is include, please note that it is the very new one. So we have to start with only the MOPH hospital. That is about 103 hospital. Okay, that is the limitation because it is at the beginning of the system. Okay, and we try to take all stakeholder when it is we are confident that it is can monitor it very well. Okay, how to interpret this data? The y-axis is about the it's about the number of illness per 100,000 people. It is about the density rate of illness. Okay, and the x-axis is present you the duration by each week during January to the end of May 2023. Okay, and the area that is in the light blue, green, yellow, orange, red, and I'm sorry there is no violet. I just know they have violet also. Okay, but this area is to illustrate you about how to interpret how high of the PM 2.5 level. Okay, it is a 1 week average level. The level present you on the another y-axis. Okay, the line is the specific disease that we monitor. We monitor the green line. The green line is acute myocardial infarction. The blue line is includes acute asthmatic attack and acute exacerbation of COPD. The two bottom line is that is the dot line and black line. It is conjunctivitis and skin diseases. Please note that the respiratory disease it trend to lower when the air pollution was decreasing also, but the myocardial infarction didn't. About you may question why the conjunctivitis and skin disease is very low. The Office of Disease Prevention and Control Region 1 that have responsibility to monitor this data. They have question also. So they go to, we call the community survey. This is an example that they went. They do not survey only Chiang Rai that I present you in this slide. There is another survey. Okay, if I present you, I think maybe 2 hours. This is an example. Yeah, the first one is ผาหมีบ้านผาหมี in Thai บ้านผาหมีเวียงภูคำ yeah แม่สายเชียงราย okay, and the next one is บ้านงิ้วเท่า very difficult for me too พาหุงผานเชียงราย okay, they go to village. Okay, the detail of the survey, the objective of this survey is to evaluate the health effect during the air pollution level that is very high at April that the organizer present to you, or the Danny told you that very high at April. Okay, they go to and they have question about whether the measure and activities of MOPH is work or not work. They go to community survey. The number of people in that day survey is about 50 from 1,000 and 50 from 600. The detail you can see in the table. Okay, but I can summarize that most of people in the community that is the rural area in Chiang Rai, they have mild illness, but most of them are healthy person, and there is a few people that have underlying medical condition, so they have only mild illness. Most of them know about how to protect themselves, to how to protect themselves from the air pollution, and they already know the air pollution situation. However, they cannot comply with all recommendation that they knew. That I show in the slide, that they have to expose to air pollution about 2 or 3 hours per day because of their daily activities that I show in the slide.
Dr. Quit, we've got three more speakers. Can I push you forward a little bit
last
to
slide.
give macro figures? We want
This is my last slide. I just show you this slide. I just show you the whole picture, what MOPH had done by measures and activities. It have to take all stakeholders in MOPH to work it coordinately. And I think this is the end of my presentation. Thank you all for attending today's presentation. I hope you found it informative and engaging.
We're not done with you yet, so you haven't finished. So now we have Dr. Kanongjit Ajanoi joining us, and she's an associate professor of law at the law faculty Chulalongkorn, and she is the legislative lead on Thailand Clean Air Network, which is the whole initiative to reform the legislation surrounding air pollution. Is that correct? And you're going to give us a quick...
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Let me talk about the kind of quite narrow issue on the whole spectrum of air pollution, PM2.5, and etc. So why don't we spend a bit time focusing on transboundary haze and the Clean Air Act that I'm and the team of Thailand Can working on. Let's start. ไม่ไป Okay, thank you. So we first start with the nature of the transboundary haze, particularly focus on ASEAN, okay? And the second one is about the draft Clean Air Act by our group, Thailand Clean Air Network, which is the think tank, working in Thailand 4-5 years ago. Finally, we end up by having the transboundary haze issue under this draft. Okay, one thing that we have to especially emphasize is that the nature of cross-border is quite common for all other issues on environmental problem. And also because of that kind of cross-border, it brings about the high complication. And here we have the different legal system of each country. We also have the different jurisdiction. We have different legal system. In some regional, like EU, they have certain structure in trying to cooperation, not only in a loose manner, but also having the so-called supranational implication. But ASEAN is not just like the EU, but some people still think that they are the same. The two are different. ASEAN is just the loose structure of cooperation among member countries of ASEAN. So we have many so-called ASEAN agreements on certain topics like on climate change, disaster, human rights, transboundary haze, but only few agreements that have legally binding status. It's only have the kind of loosely structure of how to cooperate, okay? What can we do without the ASEAN platform? Beyond the ASEAN platform, we can use the general principle of international law concerning state responsibility, while we also have the general principle of Rio Declaration of state responsibility on environmental damage over other countries' jurisdiction. Or else we have the Geneva Convention for the right to claim damage for transboundary air pollution. But that's quite far away from the practice of the regional like ASEAN. Also, we have the new coming platform, which is the UN claim that right to environment is one type of human right. So all this stuff will change the whole picture of how to deal with the air pollution and also clean air, because two things are different. Maybe they are two sides of the same coin, but if we focusing on using the focus how to manage the two things in different way, it might be not the same. So our draft Clean Air Act is done by the initiative of Thai voters. Those who have the right to vote can, collect, pull together and give the signatures, at least 10,000 signatures. According to the Thai Constitution, they can make the law and propose such draft law to the parliament. And here we are, we do that. We did all the studies, researches, and do all the draft all the way through, and we propose to the parliament with the first 20 signatures of initiatives, and then get more support, more than 2,000 something of signatures. And the draft law is about how to address the root cause of the air pollution in Thailand, which is highly complicated, the structural problem of the governmental system, the public health crisis, the legislation reform, only the small part of it, not the whole legal system, and also the right-based approach. So this draft act, Clean Air Act, is try to establish the so-called right to clean air, to be more specific than right to environment at large. Also focus both types of environmental rights, which is substantive rights, which is the right to health, right to clean air, right to life, and another type of human rights, which is procedural rights. So like, for example, like what mentioned in Aarhus Convention, right to information, right to public participation, right to access to environmental justice. Once we establish this kind of rights within our draft law, then by public law theory, it creates state obligation or state responsibility to 3 steps. First, respect such right. Second, protect the violation of such right from the third person. And finally, to fulfill such right in reality. So this is a kind of innovation legislative that we never had before in Thailand. We brought about so many legal theories and also the management theories on environmental management at large. For example, co-management, which is the way that we combine the two systems, state property regime and the common property regime, where state and civil society or communities can be partners in managing the environmental issues. In this case, it's how to manage together as partners for the clean air. Carrot and stick, especially more carrot than stick. more promotion for incentive regulations than just punishment. Transboundary haze management, which is the focus on today, we use the Singapore model with some adjustment to match with the Thai conditions. So with all this draft law, we focus on the integration. As someone speak earlier, that we had the kind of silos, we have the split between the two dimensions, like environment and health never been met well, that it should be, or air pollution and clean air never well met, or right to clean air, right to health, right to life, premature death especially, substantive rights and procedural rights as mentioned, policymaker working together with the regulator and operator, use new regime to destroy the silos among different ministries, top down and bottom up, and also among the governmental bodies and the communities or civil society. And last but not least is the command and control with the incentive kind of regulation. So finally we end up by having such draft law. We use the quite long name act to regulate the integrated management of clean air for health. Why health? Because we try to combine or integrate the environment aspect and the health aspect. That's why with the definition very first in the first page of the draft, we mentioned about clean air. Not enough, clean air for health, meaning the air quality that is safe enough to live in the more healthy environment and not go to die too early. So we have 8 chapters. The first is general provision. Second is the right to breathe clean air, and the integration of clean air for health policies, because now Ministry of Health be there and Ministry of Environment is there, and they never have a kind of integration at the higher level in the concepts and in the paradigms as well. Chapter 4 is about regulating the clean air for health management. 5 is about co-management, how to put the co-management with the health issue. And 6 is a kind of economic measures applying as a carrot together with the stick or punishment. Setting the fund called Clean Air for Health Fund, and also other kinds of the instruments in the same package. For example, from A to F, you have the clean air tax, subsidy, or fees, or deposit refund, or insurance, etc. We also have the 7th chapter, transboundary haze, and finally penalties as the stick side of carrot and stick. Focusing on the chapter 7, transboundary toxic haze or transboundary haze, we established the crime, as the certain law, legal action as the wrongdoer, doing things like you burn outside the country, you become, become the crime with the punishment. If causing the damage, you get the civil liability. For the burden of proof, it will be shifted from the victim to the wrongdoer. For liability of persons involved, how to get involved and be liable. What about the juristic person who are offenders, and how to go to the court, standing rights, and what kind of rights to sue, precautionary measures for the claim, how to make it through for the court system, and witness those wrongdoers outside the country, and the fines and damages and the period for the prosecution. So all of this stuff is in much more in detail, very technical. I don't want to bother you, but you can take a closer look in the website of thailandcan.org. This last picture is about the story of Thailand. While we have the strong political will of the government in strongly support Space Act, Outer Space, also Climate Change Act, but not enough for clean air. So let's discuss or rethink about that kind of approach. Since we are going to have the new government, I don't know yet who, but I have some good hope that this picture is going to be the blue, all the blue through, not only the red one that prohibited, no talk about clean air, but we talk only the higher upper level. So talk about clean air closer to your nose, and some pollutants under Clean Air Act is the same as those in the Climate Change Act. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ajahn Noi. Before we move on to Kundechara to give us the political perspectives, I'd just like to ask you one question, if you'd care to sit down. There's a very alarming word on this whole thing, and it's draft. Where is this legislation? Has it gone into Parliament? Is it being queued? Where is it? Because
Where is it?
You've got the structure, but...
Yes. We propose to the Parliament, and according to the Constitution, it says that any draft law have issues related to budgetary items, you must send it over to the Prime Minister to give approval. And now it's at the Prime Minister and waiting for the approval. Approve or not approve, that's the question.
Yeah, so just very quickly, could General Prayut approve this before he leaves office? Is he allowed to as a caretaker Prime Minister?
I don't think so.
Okay,
He should do nothing now.
So what we know about Thai legislation is that when there is a change of government, all legislation that has not been passed goes straight back in the queue. So we could be talking 3 or 4 years before your draft legislation.
If it's drafted by parliamentary people, yes, it will be dissolved together with the parliament.
Right.
But if it's by citizen like us, citizen status never be end. So
Right.
it's still there.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's in the queue.
So wait for the new government and the new parliament.
Okay. Well, I'm not
Thank you.
optimistic. So, Kundechara, over to you. Are you ready?
Yes.
We've just come through an election campaign period, and it was very interesting for people watching it that the environment was absolutely barely discussed by any of the parties, with the honourable exception of Move Forward and to a lesser degree the Democrats. So we're very eager to hear from you as a member of a think tank in the political world what is actually going on. Kundechara.
Yes, I'm sorry that I did not set up the slides here, but I will try my best to explain to you what we will do. After the election, the political party is political party who joined the coalition. Then now I will call the coalition parties. That means 8 political party who joined the hopefully the new government. So that's why I will discuss about the movement of this coalition on the issue of reducing air pollution. If you look at the problem here this year in Chiang Mai, you will see that during January up to up to the end of April, that is the 4 months, there will be the period of what we call the purple period. the dark purple period, which is very very upper unhealthy. So that is the situation that is quite terrible. This year we have 14 days of dark purple and 11 days of purple, and also 34 days of red. The red is upper unhealthy for sensitive groups. So if you look at this AQI, I'm sorry I did not mention that is American quality indicator. Air quality indicator. If you look at AQI, you will see that for the Chiang Mai area they have the purple and the red color altogether 60 days for 4 months. 60 days for 4 months. That is quite terrible. And I went there during the light purple period, and it's quite difficult. I have to go. I have to stand for the debate, political debate, and they also have the television program. So I cannot wear the mask for 2 hours. And after the political debates, I have get sick because of opening direct breathing for 2 hours. So that is quite terrible. So and people would like to see the change after the election. But what is the change? What is the change that government would like to bring to the people? So we try to make it clear that for this year, what we plan to do is to reduce. When I say this year, it means 2024. We say that we try to manage to have no purple zone at all. That is mean that the level of air pollution should not go beyond the red zone in case of Chiang Mai. And in case of the red and also the purple, which altogether 60 days for the 2023. Next year we aim to have we aim to reduce by half. That is mean from 60 days to thank you. From the 60 days, next slide please. From the 60 days to 30 days. That's what we plan to do. However, I have to make 3 notice with this slide. The first notice is this is still the draft. We have to discuss also with Ministry of Natural Resource and Environment, but we plan to have the informal discussion. Thank you very much. We plan to have informal discussion next year. Next week, and then we aim that once we become the government, we can announce this within a week in order to plan ahead for make this happen. This is about Chiang Mai. Then we move to Bangkok. Next slide, please.
Next slide.
Yes, if you see the case of Bangkok, you can see that the situation in Bangkok, in fact, is quite better compared to Chiang Mai. The aim for the next year is how to reduce the zone of orange. Orange is mean unhealthy for lower unhealthy for sensitive group, and up to the red and the purple altogether is reduced by half also. And in case of Bangkok, it should not be red and beyond anymore. So this is something that we plan to communicate clearly with the people both in Bangkok and in the northern part of Thailand. Please move back the previous. Another notice that I would like to mention to you, that is 4 years ago. 4 years ago, you can see that it's quite terrible as well. in the year 2019. And Anil also mentioned to me that 4 years ago she also organized this kind of forum like this, which is also partly because of El Nino, and the El Nino effect will be stronger next year. So the situation that we face is much harder, not only compared to this year, but maybe compared to other years as well. So then I move to the point that I need to discuss, that is the measure. Next slide, please. Next slide, once. That is my last slide. This is the measure that we Move Forward Party have declared before the election, and we already discussed with the coalition party in order to see how we can follow this measure. The first discussion is today morning, and we found that it should go along with other coalition party, and they also add some measure that I will mention to you. First of all, we support the drafting of the Clean Air Act that Ajahn Noi already mentioned, and the most convenient way in order to move beyond, to move forward for the act is to use the version that people have already signed, and also it's not mean that use this only version, because other parties and also other maybe the ministry, they also can submit the other draft in order to make the consideration together in the process of the drafting. So first of all, we will support this draft, and we would like to move it as fast as possible. The second point that we would like to mention, that is the problem about the forest fire. This year we have the big problem about the forest fire resource allocation. The budget has been reduced not only for the government officer, but also for the local volunteers, volunteer group. So we calculate that in order to take care of forest fire problem more efficiently, more effectively, we need to allocate more resource for this, and we calculate that on average it should be around 3 million Thai baht per tambon, but for this year it's around just 300,000 Thai baht per tambon, so it has to be increased for around 10 times. So this is what we plan for the forest fire. Certainly you may ask about the knowledge about the device, the tool is part of the allocating the resource. Then the third one, that is about the what we talk today, that is about the transboundary haze. We think that the most effective way, I mean not effective, the fastest way to control this is to use good agricultural practice in order to control of the import maize from other country, because in good agricultural practice standard it mentioned clearly that not allow the burning for both maize and also sugarcane and rice as well. So if we can use the GAP standard to control the import of these burning commodities, this burn commodity, we hope that it can reduce the problem of transboundary haze. And we also think about the Transboundary Haze Pollution Act, but it's still optional for this year because of two reasons. first is take time, but we would like to reduce the transboundary haze this year. We would like to reduce the PM 2.5 this year. So we think it may take time. So using GAP standard to control is maybe faster. And the second point that is also part of the Clean Air Act that Ajahn already mentions. Then number 4, that is we would like to provide the suitable option for Thai farmer in order to shift from the burning practice to the practice without burning. We talk about the financial support with condition in order to shift from the burning practice to non-burn practice. We also talk about the buyback for the residual biomass for 1,000 baht per ton, so it's 1 baht per kilo. So if they collect this residual biomass instead of burning, they can earn some more money. So this is something that we already plan. Then number 5, we will providing free vehicle checkup. This is the political language, providing free vehicle checkup, but on the parenthesis, that is the compulsory. So it's free, but you have to bring your car to check, and then we will give you the sticker, something like that. And then all vehicle have to show the sticker before the critical period. For example, in case of Bangkok, maybe before November, you have to check your car before that period. That is something that we plan to reduce the pollution from the vehicle. And then number 6, that is the health screening for lung cancer in the northern area. This is something like what medical doctor he already mentioned, but we try to find the latest situation, because people in Chiang Mai, they face with this kind of problem for more than four years. So we have quite concerned that it may already show some kind of this problem. We discussed with National Health Security Office, and we try to set up this kind of screening and also the research, which is also I have to consult with the Department of Disease Control as well in order to plan for this. The last one, that is the safe space or safe area for the people, and also providing the free essential protection tool like the mask for the people in the northern part of Thailand. We already discussed with some hospital, and we found that because of the COVID, they have this kind of safe area more than before. So it should be ready for serve the people during that period. But it's not enough, because we think about the nursery for the kids, for the small kids, and also the school and other areas. So we plan to provide enough space, safe space in the case that we cannot control PM 2.5 at the lower level, at the not severe for health. Then we can have this kind of safe space. And also we talk about protection to like mask. It should be free if the government cannot control the situation. But this year you have to pay yourself, something like that. So this is all the 7 measures that the political party has discussed today, and we hope that we will continue discuss with the ministry and other. For example, we also have the appointment to discuss with the big company that Danny already mentioned the name, in order to see how we can going on with this 7 measures. We try to make it ready before we are going into the real position. Yes.
Thank you very much. It's very interesting. Just before we move on, it's unlikely that we'll have a government in place before August. And we don't know who will be in charge. We know who should be in charge, but we don't know. once the government's formed, is there any chance of this Clean Air Act being accelerated and given extra priority before we go into the next round of burning, which, as we've seen, kicks off September, October?
Yes, it's possible to accelerate the process. First of all, the cabinet can, how to say in English, can prioritize
Yeah.
the bill that already in the previous parliament in order to go to the next
Right.
parliament meeting. And then within the parliament meeting, the coordination parties of the government political party, they also can make this process faster than normal.
Right. Well, that's excellent. Right. Can we go up to Chiang Mai to Mark Zimmerman, who's been waiting patiently? So Mark is, has a ringside seat in one of the most polluted areas in Thailand. And basically, he's going to give us an explanation of why this pollution, this haze, was so much worse this year than even in previous years when it's been very serious. Mark.
Appreciate the opportunity to speak at the FCCT. Am everyone able to see me on the screen?
Everything's good. Yeah, just a bit louder.
Okay, great. So I will do my best to keep my comments to less than 15 minutes, and I think I will provide a nice kind of bookend to the comments from Dr. Danny Marks earlier in the evening. So I'm going to tell you a story, and unfortunately it's a true story. It's a story about smoke in northern Thailand, but the kind of the underlying themes have to do with poverty and wealth, government policies and corporate exploitation, agriculture and deforestation. And kind of to summarize that, it's really a story about maize and meat and money. So we ask this question a lot: what is the main source of air pollution in northern Thailand? And before I get there, we just have to recognize, as has been noted earlier tonight, that up in northern Thailand, we experience about 6 months of poor air quality every year. And it's certainly not getting better, and it seems to be getting worse. And it makes life difficult for all living beings here, humans and non-human animals as well. But I'm going to argue that it's actually not the problem. It's a big problem, don't get me wrong, but it's not the problem, but it's rather the result of a much larger, longer-term problem that we don't think about very often. In fact, sometimes I tell friends and associates that in a sad way, I'm sometimes grateful for the air pollution, because without it, nobody would pay much attention to what's happening to the forests in northern Thailand. Now, there are several sources of air pollution, of course, but one is more important than the others. We have automobiles up here, we have factories and construction, of course. But agriculture is by far the most important source of air pollution in northern Thailand. And I'll categorize, for the purposes of this presentation tonight, agriculture in two classifications or two categories: lowland or irrigated farmland, which is primarily rice in northern Thailand, and upland, which is agriculture occurring in the forests, and it's entirely dependent upon rainfall. So these are both kind of separate issues, but they both are bounded by the framework of agriculture, and they both cause a great deal of pollution. But for the most part, we'll talk tonight about upland agriculture that's occurring in the forests. So I think it's really important to have some context to this. Since the 1930s, agricultural lands in Thailand have been expanding relentlessly at the expense of the forest. We've added agricultural lands and we've removed forest reliably for a very long time. In 1930, about 70% of all of Thailand was covered by forest. Imagine that. That was just one human lifetime ago. 70% of all of Thailand was covered in ancient forests. But by 1947, it was around 63%. And by 1982, it was only 25% remained. And today it's about 15 to 20%, depending upon how you define what a forest is. The area used for rice paddy increased from a few million rai to 42 million rai in the 1960s, and now stands around 62 million rai today. A lot of that is also in northern Thailand and the lowland areas. Now, during the 1950s to the 1980s, unclaimed land in the lowland areas of Thailand became scarce, and landless farmers were encouraged by the Thai government to move to the mountains, also called the frontier, to clear the forests and farm. And they displaced indigenous groups and sometimes had direct conflict with indigenous groups that had been in the mountains for centuries, if not millennia. And many of these landless farmers that had moved into the uplands began growing cash crops as opposed to just growing vegetables and fruit for their own use and for their community's use. Now, foreign and domestic investment accelerated the deforestation with the construction of roads and railroads, dams, and electrification. And by the 1980s, facing a precipitous loss of the remaining forest, Thailand banned commercial logging and declared a closure of the frontier, or the highlands. But that wasn't the end of the story. Around the year 2000, give or take a few years, the maize boom began. And this was driven by a growing demand from the global livestock industry that accelerated the conversion of forests into chemically intensive maize production. So, gripped by multi-generational poverty and encouraged by government policies and multinational corporate practices, landless mountain villagers have been incentivized to cut down the forest to plant cash crops, mainly maize. Now, this deforestation is accompanied by widespread burning, both to clear the forests, and every year more forests are cleared, and also to incinerate the residues of the last crop. These are typically on very steep mountain slopes that are almost impossible to get farm machinery to. So fire is the most expedient way to remove those residues. But very, very often, the fires extend well beyond their originally intended boundaries of, say, the field of maize, and they end up becoming conflagrations that stretch sometimes for kilometers. So, about maize, meat, and money. The worldwide animal feed industry is projected to reach nearly $600 billion by 2027. So this is an enormous industry, right? And maize is the king of meat animal and farmed fish and shrimp feed. It's found in basically all commercial meat and farmed fish feed, sometimes in proportions as high as 40%. So it's critically important to the meat animal feed industry. And Thailand is home to the world's largest agri-feed corporations, and their profits are soaring. The Thailand animal feed market alone, just Thailand, is projected to have an annual growth rate of around 3% and to reach $6.985 billion by 2026. If I did the math right on the calculator, that's 244,475 billion baht per year in just Thailand alone. Now, to give a little context, because we often hear, at least up here, we hear stories about how the smoke is really a Burmese problem, or that it's coming across the border, and that's where the lion's share of the problem is. But the reality is that maize from Myanmar is about 30% cheaper than corn grown in Thailand. That's probably has something to do with the cost of labor, among other things. And about 95% of that Burmese corn is purchased by Thai agribusinesses and brought across the border. It was valued at about $445 million in 2021. So this is an enormously large and powerful industry. So I hear this question a lot, especially during the months where the smoke is the most severe. Why doesn't the government do something? And my answer to that has been, it is doing something. And what is it doing exactly? Well, it's been doing these things that I'm going to show you for many years, for decades really. It has high tariffs and restrictions on imported maize and other feed grains in order to promote and to drive the domestic maize production in Thailand. It codified and supports contract farming between landless, impoverished mountain villagers and multinational corporations. It provides price guarantees and supports crop insurance schemes subsidies on chemical inputs like fertilizers and pesticides. It supports the biofuel industry, and no, biofuels are not green. It's party to multiple regional trade agreements, some of which we've heard about tonight, that facilitate and accelerate this problem. And of course, it has very close ties with China, which is the main destination for the share of animal feed and meat that is exported from Thailand. Much of it ends up in China. So these things, these policies and practices that have been put in place over a number of years, at least 20 years, are the backdrop or the table or the stage for what we're seeing happening in northern Thailand with the forests and the smoke. So what are the environmental consequences of expanding commodity agriculture into the forests? There are many. Obviously, deforestation and also forest degradation. So very often what's happening is that very small patches of forest are being cut, sometimes just 1 or 2 rai at a time. But hundreds of thousands of people are participating in this process. So it's a little bit like a mouse nibbling at a large loaf of bread or something. You might not notice a scratch here or a bite there, but there's so many mice working so hard that eventually the whole loaf is gone. And that's what's happening to the forests. There's also a loss of succession, the younger forests, the young trees, because they're being repeatedly burned. And that keeps the forest from growing and the future forest from being a healthy one. There's degradation of forest soils, acidification, lost structure, soil structure, and moisture and runoff when the rains come, washing the soil down the steep mountain slopes into the waterways and rivers and our reservoirs. There's water pollution, fungicides, fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, all of which end up in our reservoirs. Most of those reservoirs provide our drinking water. There are dramatic declines in biodiversity and bioabundance. Thai forests are becoming quiet, lifeless places. It becomes hotter and drier, our regional climate, because the forests are being degraded. And this leads to even more fire and more smoke. And when you add things like the El Nino effect and climate change, it becomes even worse. We have acid rain in our lakes and reservoirs, something that's rarely mentioned. We have massive and mostly unmeasured and unreported greenhouse gas emissions that result from these fires. This is carbon that's being released into the atmosphere that should be staying in the trees and in the soil. But because we're burning extensively, millions of rai every year, that carbon is going into the atmosphere, but we're not making any systematic efforts to measure it or report it. We also see decreased ability of the forests and the soils to capture atmospheric carbon. It's one of the most important things that forests do for us. But as we weaken and degrade and destroy the forests, they're less and less able to capture that carbon for us. We also see damage to the Earth's ozone layer. Most people aren't aware of this, but there's a chemistry in the atmosphere that occurs when forests burn that causes the ozone layer to be diminished, the ozone to thin, and the hole to increase, something we definitely do not want. And finally, there's severe air pollution, which is the focus of our talks tonight. So the human health consequences, I won't go into great detail because Dr. Kitty already talked about this, but effectively, there is no aspect of human health that isn't negatively affected by breathing polluted air. And just because you do not have, say, an allergic reaction, you don't get a runny nose or watery eyes and so forth, does not mean that you're not being harmed. Over time, and keep in mind this exposure is cumulative, we have children not even born being exposed to these air pollutions through their mother's womb and on through the first day they're born. And every year these children are exposed to this pollution that has serious effects on their development, their neurological development, their intelligence, and their growth. So we're really watching a catastrophic long-term health consequence to an entire group of people, millions of people here, because of this problem. So why is it getting worse? Or at least it's certainly not getting any better. Well, as Dr. Marks said earlier, we've in recent years seen many of the same policies and incentives put in place that are in place in Thailand have been expanded to Laos, Cambodia, Myanmar, and Vietnam. In addition to maize, we also see deforestation and burning for cassava, rubber, cattle, pasture, making pasture. And the same corporations that are active in Thailand are expanding regionally as the demand for meat continues to rise. So we see headlines like this, a tiny Laos boasting that they earn nearly $1 billion US from export agriculture. And it leads to arrangements like the one in the following bullet, where the Chinese government has given the Laos government an export quota of 500,000 cows per year. And the response to that was, in light of this strong market potential, the government of Laos is encouraging business to set up cattle farms. So we can kind of see where this is headed unless we take some significant actions to change the curve. Second, as global heating accelerates and the forest health declines, regional forests are becoming drier and increasingly vulnerable to more frequent and more severe and larger fires. This is a positive feedback loop that is really, really detrimental to all of us. This is what you see. You end up seeing denuded and burned hillsides, and you see cattle running through forests, and you see mountains that had forests until just a few years ago are now covered in maize. And we see lots and lots of newly denuded, newly deforested areas in Thailand. Now, I spend a lot of time on Google Earth, and it can be a little bit depressing, to be honest. This is a spot in Maicham in 1985. Google Earth has this brilliant timeline feature. I encourage all of you to go play with it and explore. And this is the same spot in 2020. This is not an exception. There are thousands of places that look just like this all across the northern Thai provinces. This image I captured yesterday morning, and it's new. About 3 years ago, it was a forest, and now it's largely denuded. And you can see the dirt road running off to the right. It's about 20 kilometers to the nearest settlement. Hold on here for a second. Is there a problem? I'm having my phone call. No? Okay, let me go back. So this road that you can see running off to the upper right end of the image leads to a proper village about 20 kilometers away. And that road has been punched through the forest.
Mark, we're not seeing the road, so...
Oh, you can't see the image?
No.
Oh, I'm very sorry. It's a very powerful image. But anyway, what I'm describing to you is the process of putting roads through forests, which is a very rapid process, and then establishing a handful of building structures where workers, farmers live, and they proceed to very rapidly cut down the forest. And this is happening all over the province. So, how can the situation be improved? I just listed a few here. There are many other ideas. First, can you see my slides now?
No.
You cannot see my slides?
No.
Okay, I don't know what's happening here.
It's looking better. Okay.
Oh my. So you were not able to see those slides the whole way?
No, but we didn't matter because you were talking very clearly.
Okay. All right.
Just get to the pictures.
Yep. I'll get right back to the pictures.
Right, okay.
So
now
there
we're in business.
This is what we see. Denuded hillsides, forests gone, cattle running through the mountains, corn where forests used to be. This is an image I captured 1985 Maicham in Chiang Mai province in 2020. Can you see the pictures?
Yeah.
Okay. This is not the exception, mind you. There are thousands of places like this all over the region. If you spend some time on Google Earth, you'll find them yourself. And this is the last one I'll show you tonight, which you can clearly see that's a brand new road that's been punched through the forest. And in the middle of the screen, there's a handful, maybe 20 small shacks with tin roofs. I don't believe there's any electricity or anything there. And it's right on the border between Chiang Mai and Mae Hong Son. You can see Mae Hong Son on the left, bottom left. But this wasn't there 3 years ago. And these small group of people have been deforesting these mountains aggressively in order to plant cash crops. This is happening all over the region. So how can the situation be improved? We can remove tariffs and quotas on the import of maize and other feed grains. That would be a big forward step. We could declare a moratorium with stiff fines for tree felling, for the conversion of forest, to agriculture in all Thai forests, not just the national parks and protected areas. We could aggressively expand reforestation efforts. We need an army of soldiers planting trees. Maybe, just as a possibility, we could have some 5,000 perhaps of the annual conscripted soldiers that coming into the army plant trees for the country instead. We need to urgently implement just policies for land tenure reform. We need to implement a tax on the purchase and export of maize. We could direct those proceeds to rural development, forest health, greenhouse gas monitoring, and supply chain monitoring. We could institute policies that incentivize natural, non-chemical farming and not burning, and gradually reduce the subsidies for farm chemicals at the same time. We could institute a national digital transparent maize supply chain management system. I think it should be overseen by the Thai government and international NGOs and not just left to industry. And finally, we could adopt a plant-based diet, or at a minimum, substantially reduce our consumption of meat and farm fish and dairy products. So in conclusion, Thailand's remaining forests are being destroyed as commodity agriculture expands into the mountains. Villagers remain poor and indebted, while giant corporations become even more wealthy and more powerful. When we as individuals consume their products, unfortunately, we directly contribute to this problem. Now, government policies, poverty, and corporate behavior have caused this situation, but these can be changed. The bottom line is that we're trading our forests and our climate and our health for maize, meat, and money. And I have to wonder how future generations will view our decision to do this. One very famous person, Dr. Jonas Salk, the creator of the polio vaccine, who gave that vaccine away to humanity for free, framed it like this: the most important question we must ask ourselves is, are we being good ancestors? And I think this definitely applies to the situation in northern Thailand. So I'll stop there. And I apologize that you could not see my slides. I wish someone had stopped me a little earlier. But nonetheless, you saw the photos, and I hope my audio was clear, and thank you very much.
Right, we've run a long time, and I appreciate that, but we have a microphone here for people who would like to ask questions. Identify yourselves, keep it short, and direct it if you wish. Have we no takers? I can't believe this, you're all stunned. Yes, we have one here. The microphone's up, so you won't be heard at the front.
Hello, my name is Marissa Small. I'm a student and I'm interested in the talks this evening. I have a lot of questions and I didn't really get a chance to formulate all of them. But I guess I want to ask the panelists up right now regarding the 7 measures for reducing PM 2.5. Do you find these measures to be satisfactory in terms of addressing the problem currently? And the second part of that question would be, given economically well-off countries will always sort of take advantage of less economic, countries that are not as economically well-off. The history seems to be as old as time, somewhat, at least after modern industrial revolution. I don't think I heard anything that incentivizes cash croppers to actually participate and change governments' minds. There was one thing mentioned about how, for example, that burning sometimes goes overboard. Sometimes they're not able to control the burn and it goes outside of the intentional zone or area that is actually being burned. Is there any way to, for example, prevent that from happening, to kind of at least add to the lessening of the burn? So I'm kind of curious about what measures governments, organizations, individuals can take to understand the perspective of a country that is, relying on this economically, the individual circumstance, and to perhaps improve I want to say work with them to improve how they're doing approaching these cash crop methods so that it's less pollutant over time. Because this is not the deaths, the contamination, it's going to continue. Extreme measures generally do not work. It's when a society is able to financially address these concerns and alleviate the pains of people. And China is a good example that they can build parks and force electric vehicles to be placed on the road. Is there something that can be done before, before more lives are lost for that reason?
All right, so we had the 7 measures that Kundechara outlined for tackling it. So perhaps to distill your question, maybe Kundechara or anybody else on the board would like to add something that may be missing that would be crucial to bringing about the changes that are being suggested here in this question.
Maybe it's Anders.
Would you like to?
I'm sure I can just make a few brief comments. I mean, I think the 7 measures are certainly a great first step. I mean, I think one of the issues, for example, as I mentioned, some of the maize gets directly exported to China. So even if you have a gap standards on maize from Myanmar and Laos, there's still going to be that gap. So that's why I think the transboundary haze part is a key part of it. You talked about a PRTR, but I mean, it didn't seem to come out in those 7 steps. So I think tracking down an industry. And I do think, transport also, but it can go further. But anyway, it's a great first step. So, it's definitely welcomed. For the other part, I think I mentioned that Brazil, for example, has done a very good job in reducing sugarcane burning. They provide harvesting machines, they outlawed burning, they got together with industry and with farmer groups, and they introduced these harvesting machines and subsidized them. So, there's certainly options out there. Thailand is not an exception. Other countries have solved this problem before. So I think you can look elsewhere for a lot of these solutions. So I'll just stop there.
Yeah, Kundechara, you did actually mention one very positive thing, which is this idea of buying waste. Mm-hmm. 1 baht a kilo, plough it into biomass. Thailand's hopelessly behind on this whole idea of virtuous recycling, generating energy. It's not as naive as it sounds. What is wrong in Thailand? This is a country where people will do anything that's legal to make money, and illegal, but they're happy to do things. You see people going around the whole time collecting waste, taking it in. If you take waste in Thailand, your rubbish, people pay you money for it. There's no country on earth that I can think of that does that. Why hasn't this business of finding ways of making money out of bioproducts so that it actually benefits ordinary people, why hasn't it been explored? It seems almost a no-brainer.
Yes, okay. I would like to add 3 small points here. I'm sorry that I did not mention to PRTR, but PRTR is quite necessary in order to control the pollution from the factories. We have around 60,000 factories around Thailand, but now they report to the Ministry of Industrial is around 1,000. So the number of on-time, real-time report is very small compared to the total number of factories in Thailand. So PRTR is quite important for Thailand. The second point about sugarcane is quite interesting in Thailand, that there are some of the sugarcane factory in Thailand, they got the burn sugarcane only less than 10%. On the opposite, there are some sugarcane factory got 70% of burn sugarcane. So this is quite puzzle within the same country between 90% of no burning sugarcane and 70% of burn sugarcane. So this is something that we really think economic incentive can solve the problem. In case of sugarcane, not only carrot, next year we may use the stick in order to control this burn sugarcane. We have to make the difference between sugarcane and maize and rice. In case of maize and rice, the burning is happen before the growing season. So you cannot control at the supply chain so easily. On the opposite, sugarcane you burn before the plant, the harvesting, so you can keep the kind of control at the factory, sugarcane factory. So we hope that we can control the sugarcane burning much better next year with the stick. This year we have the the penalty for 30 baht per ton. But we will, if you are burning,
if it's burnt,
if it's burning, we will increase it. It may be around 100 baht per ton.
Right. And for people that don't know, the sugarcane is burnt upright on the stalk before it's harvested, and the reason is it's actually so unpleasant to have to go in and cut it. It pulls you apart.
Yes.
So there are perfectly logical reasons for why these things happen. But the machinery could be supplied. I mean,
Yes.
You have a cooperative, a central state.
And the penalty will keep for the farmer in order to buy the machine, in order to reduce the burning. And then the last question that you make about the biomass residue, I think the problem is the market. We have the missing of the market. In fact, for case of rice, the rice store is very expensive in the southern part of Thailand, because in the southern part they have the little area of rice farming, but in fact they raise a lot of cow, so they need this kind of rice store. So
right.
1 baht per ton will.
So they feed the
yes,
cattle.
will make the market happen.
Right. Question.
I am Hisnuat Singchai, active citizen. I have question to panelists regarding that we have politicians here and also scholars. You spoke a lot about geopolitics and also problem from neighboring countries. Since 2016, Thai government received a lot of funds from Lan Chang Mekong Cooperation Special Fund, which is I think about 600 million US dollars. If the new government is about to form, would the new government continue to receive that fund through the agency like the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Agriculture, or Ministry of Environment? Would you continue to receive that fund?
The new government.
The new government never received that fund before. That is a fact. So frankly speaking, I don't know the condition of the fund quite clearly. So I cannot speak more than that. However, if this kind of fund linked to the situation that we cannot reduce the pollution problem, or even can make the environmental problem become more serious impacts for the Thai people, we think we choose not continue with this kind of funding. I'm sorry that I did not have the detail of the condition of the fund.
Martin.
Thanks. Martin Mensky-Stalling, Chiang Mai University Science and Technology Park. Right about the end of April, I think, we had a heat wave in Southeast Asia. And it was extremely hot. We reached record temperatures. And we were still coming out of the PM 2.5 situation, which was extended to early May. I heard a few times about use of biomass, adding value to the biomass. I think Mark alluded a little bit to that and questioning the logic for that, because corn is the wrong crop, full stop. for mountains, for slopes. You don't want to encourage adding more value to the corn. Of course, you don't want to take it away from the farmers overnight. That would be disastrous for them too. But we need to move away from corn on sloped areas. No mechanization will do it. No biocar will do it. Maybe a little bit on 15% of the. We need forests, we need agroforestry, we need something else. Forget adding in the north. Sugarcane, rice, different. My question, as I'm supposed to ask the question, can you imagine with climate change and El Nino effect and others, how will the valley of Chiang Mai and other parts of northern Thailand be if we further destroy the forests that retain water, that retain moisture, that slow down climate change? Maybe you would like to project, or some of you can comment on this positive feedback loop, which is a detrimental feedback loop on our health in 10, 20 years' time, from the droughts, from the floods, from not having that cooling effect around the valley of Chiang Mai where Mark and I live. It will be disastrous. So we will really need to, what do you think? I mean, I think climate change will come. I mean, we're now talking about resilience, so what can we do? I think, how can we incentivize farmers to move away altogether from corn? Maybe that's my question. How can we move away from corn on the mountains? Thank you.
I don't see anybody racing to answer that question.
I have a couple of.
It's quite a technical one. Mark, I think you've been fiddling around with this more than anybody else tonight.
Sure. No, I couldn't agree more with Martin's comments that the problem is that we're growing something that should not be grown in the forests, and we're destroying the forests in order to grow it. And that model that started in Thailand a few years ago has been extended aggressively into the neighboring countries. And this is the core problem. That's what I said what I meant when I said that the air pollution is not the problem. It's a result of the problem. And we need to focus on the core origins, the core cause of the problem. And so we need to find a different way for rural mountain people to maintain their livelihoods that does not involve cutting down their forests, our forests. And this is the question. But as long as they are poor, and they've been poor for a very long time, and they have the opportunity to make cash through this crop, maize, and the companies are extending that money to them, often through complex schemes and contracts that work to the detriment of the farmer eventually, causing them to become more poor and more indebted over time. But as long as that's there, they're not going to stop. Honestly, I myself would probably cut trees down and plant corn if I was hungry and had no cash. And that's what they're doing. So yes, they're lighting fires and cutting down the forest, but they're in a sense the victims of this scheme as much as anyone.
Questions? Just one final question, because I think we've run long enough. Ajahn Noi, you went through the complexity of trying to deal with this whole problem through legislation. What provision is there in this Clean Air Act for taking a look at these government policies that aggravate the problem? I mean, we have these regional alliances that have exported contract farming, Thai bad habits to the neighbouring countries. Is that in your purview when you work on this act? Because it seems to be something that should be addressed.
Yeah. Let me tell you one thing is that the Clean Air Act is not panacea. It's the supplementary legislation to the existing laws that works. For example, for the contract farming, we had an existing legislation called Contract Farming Act already. And there are specific provisions prohibiting doing the contract farming that destroy the forests or cause environmental harms and health problems. The problem is that we never have the strong, efficient law enforcement according to such act. So the Clean Air Act cannot intrude to apply such provision while the existing legislation is already there. Okay. Also, like the land tunnel, we have plenty of legislation on Forest Act, National Park Act, etc. Kind of legislations around the green issues on particular area of land. We also have the land titles law, but here again, we have some problem in terms of very sophisticated way of law enforcement according to those scattering laws. So it creates the accumulation of problems in terms of land tunnel. Here again, the draft law on Clean Air Act cannot panicure all those stuff that have been, emerged for long time ago until now. What Clean Air Act can do is to be used as the supplement for the issues that never been enacted in the law. So many people ask me the original and accumulative legal problems, either the old laws is very old, not applicable to the modern society, or else the written law is okay, but the law enforcement is very weak. Whatever is the cause, the Clean Air Act cannot do all the stuff. So
Sure.
we have specific area of what the Clean Air Act can serve.
Right, and when we looked at the maps, we noted that Thailand had about half the hot spots of Laos, and that Myanmar was much higher. When you take into account the fact that Laos is an underpopulated country, it does not have a police force or an army capable of enforcing a burning ban. Legislation will change nothing. This is habit. And so I just want to finish this evening on a rather depressing note with you. When I was writing a story recently about this problem, I talked about pyromania, this how much people set fire to things in this part of the world, which is something, we have bonfires in England, but you don't go down motorways and see the whole thing blazing like you do here. You use the word penchant for burning. Can you just leave us on that depressing note, because that's what's going on. People just light everything up.
No, I mean, I think you're right that it's the transboundary dimension which is the key part, and there's the penchant for burning. But I do think there are solutions out there, at least trying to hold account, for example, those in the supply chains who are incentivizing these people.
Right.
I mean, of course, it wouldn't solve everything, as we've talked about, but it would be a big start, at least.
Yeah.
So a bit more positive.
May I add a little bit about forestation? Just a little
Yes,
bit.
please.
Yes. There are some difference between the policy of the the coalition parties. So we need to discuss more about the forestation, shifting from corn to the forest. I would like to mention that in fact most parties agree to change at least parts of the corn to the forest area, but the way in terms of policy mechanism still have some difference. For example, in case of Khao Krai Move Forward Party, we mentioned about we use the way of solving indebtedness to support the people to go the forest, for example. But for Pheu Thai parties, they use some kind of land security, and the growing forest is the part of of condition for land security for the local people. So this and some party they also think about carbon credit for the growing the forest. So this is some different which is quite important to be discussed. So the next working team have to discuss about the difference in terms of policy mechanism, and we hope that we can find the agree solution in order to start this kind of the development.
Good, thank you, Kundachara. It's exceptionally long, this program. It's run for 2 hours, 20 minutes, and it's such a complicated subject, as we all know, that we could go on for another until midnight, but we're not going to. You've been an incredibly quiet audience. Normally I have to tell people to shut up at the bar. But I think it just shows actually how interested people are in this very troubling issue that, as Mark points out, is going to affect people in 30 years' time who grew up stunted and hurt by the environment that they have no choice to live in. So, Kundachara, thank you very much. Dr. Krit, Ajahn Noi, Danny, and Mark, fighting with your system up there in Chiang Mai. It didn't matter that we didn't see the slides. So everything you said was crystal clear. It was a relief.
Thank you very much.
And if you are not members of the FCCT and don't normally come here, I suggest you join, because it's a lot cheaper over a year than spending 450 baht to get through the door. It's money well spent. So think about it hard, and it'll be an investment. Thank you.
Thank you.